The real spring, not just all this damp and drizzle. Spring always feels like a pardon, doesn't it? Margaret said, her gaze fixed on the cherry trees just beyond the razor-wire fence. Their branches, skeletal for months, now held the faint pink and white promise of blossoms. Claire murmured a non-committal response, and Margaret continued, her voice raspy but warm, rubbing a wrinkled cheek. It's the easiest time of the year to get by. Even when your life is a complete mess on all fronts, you notice it less in the spring. I don't know why. Everything's the same, really. The facility, the guards, this dampness that gets in your bones, the hopelessness of it all, and yet something inside feels better. Her soul, it seemed, was trying to bloom along with the trees. And you, Claire, she sighed, her eyes the colour of faded denim, filled with the complex mix of joy and sorrow. Spring is giving you your freedom. Tomorrow you'll walk out of here and start over. A new life. A new life? How? Claire scoffed, blowing on her cold fingers. I've been rotting in here for a decade, and I was a bad person. No, Margaret, you don't just forget something like that. Margaret nudged her gently with her shoulder, a soft chuckle escaping her lips. Oh, but you do. The worst of it fades. Even in the middle of all this ugliness, there are moments of good. A shared cup of coffee, a friend's voice. That's what you'll remember. Her smile faltered slightly. I envy you, though. I don't think I'll ever get out of here. My heart's been acting up lately, and you know what the medical care is like in this place. Claire said nothing. Margaret was in her late 60s and had already spent nearly 9 years at the Willamette Valley Correctional Facility for Women. She had 3 more to go. 12 years. That was the sentence the judge had handed down for the night she'd finally fought back, striking her drunken, abusive husband with a cast-iron skillet. What the court had seen as malice, every woman in this facility understood as survival. Margaret had met her old age behind bars. Over the long years, she and Claire, despite a big age gap, had forged a bond as strong as family. The thought of their impending separation was a physical ache for them both. Don't get me wrong, I'm so happy for you, Margaret said softly. Just don't forget me. Write sometimes, visit if you can. I'll be waiting. Claire looked up at the vast, cloudless sky and winced against the brightness. Of course I will, she nodded. But I don't even know what I'm going to do out there. Who's waiting for me? No one. In some way it's easier in here. Everything is decided for you. Out there? Margaret pulled a stubby pencil and a folded scrap of paper from the lining of her jacket and hastily scribbled something down. Here, look, this is my brother's address, she said, pressing the note into Claire's hand. His name is Frank. He runs an apple orchard out in the Hood River Valley. He always needs good workers. Just tell him you're a friend of mine. He'll help you get on your feet, find a place to stay. He's a good man. And take this, too. Margaret reached around her neck, unfastened a delicate chain, and pushed it into Claire's pocket. It was a simple silver cross, worn smooth and thin from years of touch. Claire protested, not wanting to take such a precious gift, but Margaret's gentle insistence was absolute. The two friends hugged tightly, a long silent embrace, trying not to think about how this might be their final goodbye. The next morning, as a guard led Claire down the long corridor toward the exit, she glanced into the industrial laundry room. She saw Margaret bent over a folding table, lost in the rhythm of her work, amidst the roar of the dryers and the hiss of the steam presses. Claire waved, but Margaret didn't see her. Come on, let's go, the guard urged impatiently. Or did you like it so much in here you decided to stay? She let out a sour laugh. Claire managed a tight, humourless smile in return and kept walking. The corridor opened into a yard, leading directly to the massive steel gates. As if on cue, they groaned open, revealing a path to a world she barely remembered. Claire took a deep, shuddering breath, hoisted her duffel bag onto her shoulder, and walked into the unknown. An old, half-empty bus took her into the city. For a while she just wandered through the downtown streets, a ghost invisible to the bustling crowds. People hurried by, laughing, talking on their phones, living lives that felt 1,000,000 miles away from her own. She sat on a bench in a small park, eating a hot pretzel she'd bought from a street cart. Freedom was good. She tilted her pale, drawn face up to the sun, letting its warmth soak into her skin, and smiled a genuine, unguarded smile. No one was shouting, no one was rushing her, no one wanted anything from her. She tossed the last bite of her pretzel to a pigeon, licked the salt from her fingers, and walked down the wide steps to the waterfront. The Willamette River, swollen with spring melt, churned below, its powerful brown current carrying leaves and twigs out toward the sea. Claire leaned against the railing, watching the water flow endlessly past, disappearing around a bend. She might have lingered there indefinitely, lost in the quiet rush of the river, had it not been for a faint, reedy cry that pierced the urban hum. Squinting against the low-angled sun, she scanned the long, narrow pier, a structure that would soon be bustling with small leisure craft and fishing skiffs. Then she saw several dark, shifting shapes on the still melting snow, a cluster of worried birds, perhaps, or debris. Then another impossibly tiny speck bobbing precariously on a separate ice floe caught her eye. "Help!" The desperate, childlike shriek was clearer now, thin and fragile. "Somebody, please help!" Adrenaline surged through Claire. She shed her comfortable woolen coat. Her worn canvas tote bag, usually slung securely over her shoulder, became an encumbrance too, and she flung it aside as she sprinted down the slick, sloping embankment. Each step was a precarious dance, a test of balance and agility she hadn't realized she still possessed. Despite her desperate caution, Claire's foot found an unseen patch of ice. She sailed through the air in an undignified, almost comical somersault, a gasp escaping her lips. By some miracle, her spine remained intact, but she landed flat on her back, sliding downhill as if on a makeshift toboggan. Her descent ended abruptly in a powdery drift of snow. Shaking, she pushed herself up, wincing as she felt the sting of tiny ice fragments embedded in her palms. Hobbling toward the pier, she picked at the wounds, her breath coming in ragged gasps. By the time she reached the water's edge, the source of the desperate cries, the tiny figure on the ice floe, was already drifting perilously far, threatening to disappear around the river's next bend. Claire didn't hesitate. She broke into a clumsy run along the bank, her eyes locked on the girl and her icy raft, her mind racing, calculating angles and distances. It was a small child in a bright scarlet hat with a fluffy white pom-pom, like a beacon against the stark greys and browns of the river. She sat hunched in the middle of her vast, unstable island of ice, knees drawn to her chest, a picture of pure terror. "Hey, little one, don't be scared," she shouted, fighting to control her ragged breathing. "I'm going to get you out of there." Hearing a voice, realizing she wasn't alone, that someone had answered her desperate plea, the girl found a flicker of courage. She bravely crawled to the very edge of the floe. "Help me, please," she piped, extending a tiny hand, as if Claire could simply reach across the churning expanse of water and pull her to safety. "Please, save me." Claire's heart sank with a chilling certainty. Ahead, barely a football field or two away, loomed the skeletal remains of an old, dismantled pedestrian bridge. Its supports were thin, jagged metal beams, sharp as knives, rising ominously from the swirling currents. To make matters worse, the river here narrowed, accelerating into a treacherous whirlpool, a natural vortex. An ice floe caught in those churning waters would inevitably spin like a child's top or a dissolving sugar cube, before being violently splintered against the protruding iron. Without a second thought, Claire launched herself onto the first ice floe close to the bank. She didn't pause, needing the momentum to keep her balance, before executing a perilous leap to the next. The third floe groaned ominously under her weight, cracking and tilting precariously, threatening to capsize and plunge her into the icy depths. Soaked, bruised, and utterly electrified, Claire felt no fear, no pain, no fatigue. Her sole focus was the girl. With a final, desperate lunge that cleared an entire floe, Claire finally reached the trembling child and swept her into her arms. Just as despair threatened to overwhelm them, a stroke of pure fortune, a massive, fallen oak tree, lay half-submerged ahead. Claire waited for their ice raft to drift alongside it, then carefully placed the little girl onto its smooth, water-polished trunk, and then scrambled aboard herself. As expected, their ice floe met one of the bridge's jagged supports with a sickening crunch, shattering into dozens of smaller pieces. Claire, her arms aching, cautiously guided the girl to the shore. They both collapsed onto the cold, damp pebbles, utterly spent. "What's your name, little one?" Claire croaked, her voice rough, watching clouds, like scattered ice floes, drift across the vast sky. "Nora," the little girl replied, her voice soft and hesitant. "It's a beautiful name." The girl lay sprawled on the stones, her arms outstretched like a tiny angel fallen from the sky. Claire, too, was unwilling and unable to move. Her palms burned from cuts and scrapes, and her lungs felt as if someone had filled them with broken glass. Her legs, numb and unresponsive, might as well have been prosthetics. She imagined them lying there forever, two forgotten figures, until the swollen river claimed them and carried them out to the endless ocean. Claire pulled out from the pocket Margaret's silver cross. She pressed the cool metal to her lips, a silent prayer of gratitude, and pushed herself to her feet. Nora was now sitting on a large flat stone, tossing colourful pebbles into the water. "Don't sit around on the cold ground, you'll catch a chill," Claire said, settling beside her. "My feet are already soaked through," Nora giggled, a surprising sound of light-heartedness. "So I'll probably be sick tomorrow anyway." Claire gently scooped the girl into her arms and began to wade along the riverbank toward a distant, arching stone bridge, the only crossing in sight. There was no one else around, only seagulls circling overhead and the occasional caw of crows perched on dark mossy stones that jutted from the water like the gnarled fingers of some ancient, submerged titan. To her relief, her bag and coat were still there, untouched. She swung it over her shoulder, then asked Nora, "Where do you live, Sweet Pea? Let's get you home." Nora winced, casting a worried glance at her rescuer. "You won't tell them everything, will you?" she asked cautiously. "To my mum, I'll be in so much trouble." "Well, of course you will be," Claire nodded, a hint of sternness in her voice. "And rightly so. You shouldn't be wandering off like that. I used to wander too, and—" "And what?" Nora pressed, her eyes wide with curiosity. Claire simply waved a dismissive hand. "You don't need to know about that," she replied. "Now come on, or you'll definitely catch a cold, and then it'll be pneumonia." Taking the girl's hand, Claire headed toward the main street, realizing that she wouldn't get to the apple farm today. Nora led her to a grand old mansion nestled beside a small public square. Claire felt a sudden wave of self-consciousness as they stood before the tall, ornate, wrought-iron gates. Her coat was dirty and torn, her hands caked with dried blood, and her face smudged with dirt and a few dark bruises. Suddenly, the gates opened with a long, drawn-out creak. "Nora, where have you been?" a young woman exclaimed, hurrying down the wide marble steps of the grand porch. "I was just about to call the police. I've had the whole neighbourhood out looking for you. You're soaking wet and filthy. What on earth happened to you?" "Mum, it's okay," the girl waved off her mother's concerns. "Really, I almost drowned in the river, but this lady saved me." You should have seen her, Mum, how she jumped across the ice floes. And then we got out on a big log and just lay on the rocks." The woman blinked, bewildered, trembling slightly. "How? Almost drowned?" she choked out, her voice barely a whisper. "What in heaven's name?" "It's true," Claire interjected, her voice hoarse but firm. "Your daughter was in real danger. I don't know what might have happened if I hadn't been there." For the first time, the woman truly focused on Claire, and her face paled further. "You're covered in blood," she cried, seeing Claire's hands. "Right, both of you, into the house now. We need to clean you up. Come on, hurry." Claire stepped cautiously into the grand foyer, freezing on the threshold, unsure where to go or what to do next. The air inside was cool and still, hushed like a forgotten cathedral. Everywhere she looked, paintings adorned the walls, life-sized marble statues stood sentinel, and towering étagères overflowed with vibrant greenery and exotic blossoms. Claire, feeling suddenly small and out of place, leaned hesitantly against the wall and turned to the woman. "Where's your powder room?" she asked, her voice echoing eerily through the cavernous space. "Let me show you," the woman offered, a warm smile gracing her lips. "It's easy to get lost in here." She led Claire down a long, narrow corridor dimly lit by ornate sconces that cast soft pools of light on the polished wooden floor. "What a magnificent place you have," Claire murmured, her eyes wide with a mix of awe and bewilderment as she took in her surroundings. "It must be quite a task to live in such a vast house. Does the cleaning take a whole week?" The woman chuckled, a light melodious sound. "This is actually my parents' home. They just purchased it recently. I rarely stay here myself. My daughter and I sometimes visit, like now. As for the cleaning, we have a wonderful housekeeper who takes care of everything." She gestured toward a discreet door and offered to help Claire with her wounds, but Claire politely declined. Inside, Claire luxuriated in the simple pleasure of hot steaming water, scrubbing her hands and face clean, letting the heat soothe the sting of her cuts. Finally, refreshed and feeling somewhat human again, she emerged. Nora, now changed into a dry outfit, and with her bright red hair neatly combed, skipped over to Claire and took her hand. "Do you want to see my toys?" the girl asked, her eyes sparkling mischievously. "I have so many." "I'd love to," Claire smiled genuinely. "And while you're doing that," the woman chimed in, "I'll prepare some refreshments. Would you prefer tea or coffee?" She paused, a playful glint in her eye. "Or something stronger?" "Coffee, please," Claire said, her voice soft. "With sugar, no cream." She followed Nora into a spacious living room and, feeling a sudden shyness, sank onto a plush velvet sofa. The room was furnished with an understated elegance, a stately mahogany furniture set, heavy crimson drapes framing the tall windows, and a collection of religious icons and landscape paintings adorning the walls. Claire turned her head to admire a massive carved dresser, and then her breath caught in her throat. There, nestled in an intricately carved wooden frame, was a large childhood photograph. It was her, Claire, no older than 8, with dark, unruly curls, adorned by a vibrant rose-pink ribbon. A sombre black mourning ribbon was tied diagonally across one corner of the picture. Her fingers, numb with disbelief, trembled as she reached out to touch it, inadvertently knocking the photograph to the floor. "Oh no!" she gasped, watching Nora's mother calmly gather the scattered fragments of glass. "Don't worry, the picture isn't harmed," the woman quickly reassured her. "That's my late sister, Eliza. My parents always put her picture out. They can't quite come to terms with losing her." Claire slumped back against the sofa, feeling the world tilt as consciousness threatened to slip away. A familiar suffocating stench filled her nostrils, the damp, earthy smell of mould, of cold, musty basements, of wet rags, decaying refuse, and acrid smoke. Before her eyes, a nightmarish montage flickered. Abandoned buildings, bustling train stations, desolate bus stops, a blur of unfamiliar, hostile faces, and endless, slanting grey rain. Claire was utterly alone in that alien, unforgiving world, a solitary wildflower struggling to bloom in a barren, grimy wasteland. She sank into a cold, clammy mire of half-sleep, half-waking terror, shivering with a profound, bone-deep chill. She curled into a tight ball, like a beaten, half-crushed stray pup, ceasing to react to anything. Claire, or rather Eliza, as she now knew her true name was, had been abducted when she was just 6 years old. A group of derelict figures, lurking on her walk home from school, had thrown a reeking burlap sack over her head and dragged her away into the unknown. So she ended up in the Romany family in a neighbouring city. There was a lot of children. Some Claire saw only once, while with others she would later beg for coins near train stations, churches and bus stops, sharing meagre scraps of food. The one she remembered most vividly was the patriarch's son, a tall, dark-haired boy with wild, curly hair and a large, round silver earring in his left ear. It was he who, years later, helped Claire and 2 other girls escape their captivity, nearly paying with his life. His father had beaten him brutally. After escaping, she fell in with a gang of street thieves, resorting to petty crimes to survive. She tried to save enough for a bus ticket home, but when she finally returned to her childhood neighbourhood, she found strangers living in her parents' house. Believing her mother and father were gone forever, Claire rejoined her new friends and her previous life of petty crime. By then, she was almost 17. The shy, awkward girl had transformed into a brazen and resourceful young woman. The gang's leader, a stocky, powerful man named Shiv, had fallen for her, making her his trusted confidant. All the heists he planned, Shiv discussed with Claire, consulting her on the best way to execute their schemes. With Shiv, Claire wanted for nothing. The infatuated young gang leader lavished her with the best clothes and shimmering baubles, dreaming of a day when their lives would be utterly transformed. By the time they reached adulthood, they had amassed a substantial fortune, marry and escape to some distant sun-drenched coast, leaving behind their grim, dangerous and morally dubious underworld existence forever. But now, as Shiv always declared, they simply needed to endure and take what was required without seeking permission from anyone. They pilfered from small diners, corner stores, and pried open car doors, slipping through the shadows like ghosts never once caught. Shiv truly believed this streak of luck would last indefinitely, but one fateful autumn night their good fortune, like a fickle friend, turned its back on them. It happened when they decided to breach a quiet antique shop in the heart of the historic district. As was his custom, Shiv had meticulously staked out the location beforehand, examining every crevice and shadow, identifying every weakness. So in the deep hush of night, as the town slumbered beneath a velvet cloak of darkness, he and his cohort set to work. Claire was assigned the role of lookout, her senses sharpened to a razor's edge, waiting for Shiv and a couple of burly associates to force the door and slip inside. Everything unfolded with the precision of a finely tuned clockwork until, in the very thick of their operation, an elderly, stooped night watchman materialized as if conjured from thin air. Realizing the jig was up and that the watchman would undoubtedly speak, Shiv, his eyes burning with a desperate, wild resolve, yanked a switchblade from his pocket and plunged it into the old man's chest. The watchman's body went limp, a guttural, rattling gasp tearing from his throat. Claire, gripped by a visceral horror, tried to intervene, tears streaming down her face. "Run, you fool!" he bellowed, his voice raw, watching the dying man convulse. "They'll catch you!" But Claire shoved him away with a raw cry of despair. "Then go to hell!" Shiv spat, his final words like sharp stones hurled into the stillness. "Rot if you want!" And with that, he vanished into the encompassing shadows, abandoning her alone with the dying watchman. Claire stood frozen, her feet rooted to the cold pavement, a desperate, fragile hope flickering within her that the man could still be saved. She quickly folded her shirt into a thick pad and pressed it firmly over the gaping wound, pushing down with all her might to stem the terrifying rush of crimson that seeped through the cotton and stained her fingers. "Please, just hold on," she whispered with shaking fingers, dialed 911. The court showed her no leniency, especially since Claire steadfastly refused to name her accomplices or reveal their whereabouts. She remained fiercely loyal to Shiv, even after he had callously deserted her and simply fled, vanishing like a frightened rabbit. For this unwavering silence, she was handed a sentence of 10 long years. And there she met Margaret, who had already served a few years of her own sentence. If not for Margaret's unwavering friendship, Claire would undoubtedly have succumbed to the profound despair that had long consumed her, ending her life as she had often contemplated, her spirit tearing at its very seams. It was only Margaret, this sturdy maternal woman with a face etched by life's trials, but eyes brimming with kindness and hands rough from years of toil, who was able to give Claire what she needed most: unconditional care and love, a tender touch amidst the harsh, unyielding barbed wire. Claire's eyes fluttered open and suddenly she saw it, the face of her real mother. "Do you know who I am?" Claire whispered. Her real mother leaned over and pressed a warm, almost feverish kiss to Claire's forehead. Her lips were soft like the first rays of sun after a long, bitter winter. "Of course I know you, my sweet Eliza," she replied, hot tears spilling onto Claire's face, each tear a bittersweet fusion of sorrow and overwhelming joy. "How could I ever forget you? You're finally home. We've all been waiting for this moment, years stretching into an eternity of longing." Claire saw other faces then, her father's, her sister's, her young niece's. All of them turned toward her, silently smiling, their eyes shining with tenderness and profound relief. No one uttered a sound, afraid to shatter the solemn, joy-filled silence that enveloped them, a crystalline stillness that chimed like a delicate bell in the air. A month later. "That's how it all happened," Claire wrote on a sheet of lined paper, her hand seeming to move with a will of its own, the pen scratching softly against the surface. "I saved a little girl, and it turned out that she was my niece Nora." She paused, marvelling at the improbable twist of fate. "2 years after I disappeared, my parents had another child, my younger sister. But don't think for a moment I've forgotten about you, dear Margaret. My family and I discussed it, and we found you a wonderful attorney. I've already met with him, and he said he believes he can secure your parole. So just a little longer, my dearest friend. It will all be over soon. That's all for now, my sweet Margaret. I love you, and I send you hugs and kisses. God willing, we'll see each other very soon." Claire pressed her lips to the letter, a silent blessing, and carefully folded the sheet. "Aunt Claire, let's go for a walk." Nora burst into her room, her voice a bright musical chime, chasing away the last shadows of Claire's past. "You promised this morning, remember?" Claire's heart swelled with an almost unbearable affection as she gently pinched her niece's nose and nodded. "Of course I remember," she replied, her voice soft with new-found contentment. "Where do you want to go?" "To the creek," Nora blurted out instantly, her eyes shining with eager anticipation, mirroring the sparkle of the spring morning. "We can listen to the peepers. Will you catch me one?" Oh, no, Claire laughed, her laughter a clear, melodious sound, rich with the joy she had so recently rediscovered. Those I'm afraid of. Why do you need them? Claire asked, genuinely curious, watching Nora's earnest face. Well, I'd put it in a jar, Nora mused, her brow furrowed in earnest thought, and it would live with me. Claire swept her niece into her arms, the light weight of the child a grounding presence, and spun her around the room. Nora's delighted squeals mingled with Claire's own laughter, their voices weaving a joyful melody that filled the sun-drenched space.